7 of Block 2 of the Retail Management Program. Continuing from where we had left in Unit 6, where we looked at the retail formats, today we'll go deep dive into various characteristics of what retailing for retailers are and how retail formats are attuned to the market requirements. Furthermore, we'll look into store and non-store retail formats that are existing in the market today and with a little bit of futuristic aspects that the retailing industry is impacting with specific focus to the Indian market. So if you see here, we will be looking into the ownership-based formats and focus on the classification of retail formats on operational parameters. Operational parameters broadly divided into store and non-store parameters, and we will look into how it is looking into the Indian retail landscape. One thing we have already discussed in the past that the retail sector is going through a kind of an evolution right from a proprietary firm to large scale retail outlets which are owned by companies. But at the end of it, there is one common factor which is very important, that is the market or the consumers. Today's consumers, if you see, their shopping habits, their behavior that they exhibit when they purchase various products has seen an overall change depending upon the kind of products and services that they are purchasing. If that is so, the retail outlets also, the retailers who are in this business of connecting with the end consumers also need to dovetail into understanding the behavioral aspects of the consumers as well as create avenues or create touch points to make that particular transaction which is called the last mile. Companies across, whether it is an individual company or a wholesaler or a distributor, have also started getting into the retailing parameter or the retailing process so that they are able to control the markets better. Now, why is that? If you see here, most of the companies, if you see the retail outlets, primarily because they are dealing with the end users, that talks about the importance of what retailing as a process is. As I told you before, if you look into the distribution strategy, from manufacturers to wholesalers to distributors or any other intermediary, the last person in the chain of distribution is the retailer. Hence, the end user, when they interact with the retailer, that is becomes a crucial point of exchange for the marketers, for the wholesalers and distributors, because the entire thing will only work when the end users or the customers who frequent these retail outlets and consume, which means purchases. So the point of purchase which the retailers offer is the biggest kind of a point of transaction and also very important from the customer, from the company's point of view, in order to have a better control over the market, because that's where you will understand what the customer requirements are. It also gives an opportunity to understand the behavioral patterns. Today, with application of technology, large scale retailers are using technology excessively to understand the kind of buying behavior that people look forward to, what kind of things that they are seeking for, what kind of services and facilities are they looking forward to, what kind of recreational, because retailing has also been considered as something which satisfies the customer on a kind of a therapeutic way. So retailers across the board, whether it's a small retailer or to a large retailer, cannot ignore what the customers are looking forward to, going in form of the satisfying the customers. That is the critical part, and that particular aspect, the target market, is evolving, and the number of clusters that are coming up, the number of demographics that is coming up, the number of economic parameters on which you can classify them is going, and each of these clusters behave in a different manner. When we talk about the Gen X, millennials, Gen Zs, if you see their behavioral patterns, they significantly change. And they also, in terms of the retail mix, when we talk about retail mix, A retailer has to not only talk in terms of a format today, but they also have to understand what kind of products they need to curate, what kind of services they need to do, what kind of price points that they are going to do, what kind of location dynamics needs to play so that they can reach out to their target customers. They also need to also look into in terms of what kind of satisfaction parameters are from the customer's viewpoint. So until unless they do a deep dive into understanding these parameters, it will be difficult to curate to the customer requirements. So when we talk about retail mix today, retailers need to fit the right kind of retail store formats to meet the customer expectation. So many a times you will find that the formulation execution of the retail mix is affected by the retailers, which affects the retailers' performance and which is again driven by the consumer expectations. So many a times the retailer mix has to understand the various characteristics under which we can classify them. So we will now look into the various characteristics which govern the retailer. If you see here, we will look into the kind of needs on which the retailers can be classified. For example, they could be getting into mass retailers. Mass retailers, obviously, as the name suggests, you depending upon the market need or the market size, you find that these are mass level players. So their numbers are very high, and obviously they have to look into basic staple products which are consumed on a regular basis, where the frequency of purchase is extremely high. So you'll find major inroads. Most of the people, retailers who want to get into this space, the kind of format that they have to come up is very different. Looking into exclusive outlets, exclusive retailers. Exclusive retailers are again those retailers which cater to a very select needs of the customer. For example, if you're talking about boutiques, apparels are there, but then if you want to have a top of the line boutiques, for example, you have to have a Zara kind of a thing or any kind of fashion apparel outlet. There is a certain exclusivity in terms of what the customers are expecting. So obviously, from that market size may not be as high as the mass market retailers. So retailers in this case they do offer and are very selective in terms of their positioning or in terms of offering those kind of retail opportunities for the customers, because this could be very concentrated markets. They may not be spread out like the mass retailers. Then the other type of retailers is somewhere which is in between the mass retailers and the exclusive, which are called the specialty retailers. So they do have a certain amount of presence, but then point is their numbers may not be as high as the mass retailers, but definitely less than the exclusive retailers. Because understand, everything boils down to ultimately what kind of overheads they are to maintain store profitability in terms of sustaining the retail stores. The second parameter which we can look into in terms of the classification in terms of the characteristics of retailers is on the variety of products and assortments that are made available. So you could be broadly you can classify them into general merchandise, because general merchandise talks about a broad range of product categories which the customers have to deal with. And then we look into the specialty merchandise. Specialty merchandise are those which deals with very, as the name suggests, very specific kind of product categories that we look into. Third, which we can look into, are the price-based strategy on which you can classify the kind of retailers. This I'm going to the characteristics of the retailers. In under that, we look at retailers which are into discount parameters. They look into discount rates, competitive pricing, premium pricing. Now I talked about that some formats would be would be requiring very discounted pricing. If you talk about the groceries, the convenience stores, they would look for this kind of characteristics. Competitive pricing, yes, they may not be pricing as low as the discount stores, but they would be looking into because the discount stores will be having a lot more footfalls, and people come there for the low price strategy. Whereas competitive pricing outlets could be another characteristics for retail outlets, where people would be coming mostly for buying certain quality based products but may not be paying in the low segment. It could be moderately priced, slightly higher than that. Then comes the retailers who deal with premium pricing. So you must be seeing that there are some outlets like the Zara, which I've talked about, right? Or H&M. Those talk about those kind of retailers. They spin a premium pricing image associated with it. So that also deters many customers to frequent those kind of outlets, right? So, but then they may they may not deal with such high volumes like the other players, because they are looking into a very niche market or a specific market, because premium pricing has to be very selective in a country like India. But then their presence is, because the market consists of a whole lot of people. On one hand, you have people who are looking for discounts. There are people who are looking for moderate kind of pricing. They're also looking into high end. So you have to cater to, as a retailer, you have to cater to all these parameters or to some specific parameters depending upon your capabilities, right? So the fourth most important thing is what kind of promotional mix. Today, with the advent of digital, most of the retailers adopt various kind of promotional mix elements to reach out in their retail mix to entice the customers to come and visit. So they would go for very massive advertising in the local media or in the top of the line major media also. They would also promote direct mail. They would also look into sales promotional activities. Some of them who deal with very high end products may also go for personal selling. Personal selling cannot be done for low price products. It has to be done where there's an interaction required. For example, insurance, they will never go. You may have a nowadays you have a kind of online formats where you can, looking into your needs, you can say what kind of insurance you would require. But having said that, there could be areas where AI is now trying to take up those to predict the kind of needs they have and can curate the. But still, then there could be involvement of personal selling where there will be human element required. Apart from this, you also look into how the digital transformation is also being adopted by retailers, which is influencing the kind of formats which are coming into play. The next most important thing which we look into is the method of distribution. How are you distributing? Are you going for a store based, something which I just put it on the board? That is it a store based format or a non store based formats? So in the store based formats, you have got independent locations, or you could have malls. You could have malls which are called strip malls, where you could be using the facilities across two stores, right? Or you could have central business districts. This is not a very common thing in India yet, but in some cases where you have planned cities coming up, you will find the planned cities, they have an area which is consisting of the residential locations. But adjoining that, they are supported by a market district, which we call as a market district. But that is basically a marketplace which allows various retail formats to come up, like Walmarts and all that they can come up. But that's a format mostly followed in the US markets or in the Western world. India, those things are slightly concocted in a change, primarily because the way we look into the retail format, you must have seen, it is getting blurred. The commercial business districts and the standalone stores, they are merged. So they look into where the vicinity, where you can draw your customers from. Based on that, they would open up the stores. So that's how it is done. Apart from that, you have got non-store retailing, which are on the like the kiosks, which are very less, which in case you may find it in certain markets in India, not very vending machines being put, ATMs being used, or we're talking in terms of online sales or direct marketing, which we say. So you don't require a physical requirement of any stores to make it happen. Next, we move into the various kind of retail formats which is there, which broadly can be divided into two parts: the store-based retail format, which I'm showing on the screen right now. Apart, these require, as the name suggests, store-based means there is a physical existence of an outlet. Now, there is various types of store-based retail formats. These differ in terms of what kind of products they are holding, what kind of engagement they have, what kind of, in terms of services they are catering to, what is the ownership that they have got. So, you may find that across these kind of types of stores which have been outlined, we'll go through some of them in detail in kind of one to one basis. But one of the critical things is that Whether it is from a convenience stores to a supermarket to a department store to a hypermarket or a specialty store, everything boils down to what is the product that you are offering to the marketplace. Apart from that, you can also intervene in terms of not only making products available, different kinds of product available, but also making the user experience, something which we have been talking about from day one, right? So these are the things. But store retailing can be broadly classified. This is one of the ways in product line differentiation retail formats are there. But there are different other kind of store retailing where you can see that in terms of the type of services that the retailers want to give. For example, you want to get into self-service, right? So self-service stores are where companies, where in some of the departmental stores, supermarkets, the customers is coming to buy something of their own. They don't require any kind of manual intervention. They would pick up this trolley, they'd go down the aisles. But then that planogram has to be properly arranged in terms of to ascertain self-service. There are also retail formats where you have to, there is some amount of self-service, there is some amount of also manual intervention. So there are limited services which are provided by the outlets. Now, where there you would require a counseling, where you require more, okay, suppose you want to go and find in jewelry, what kind of characterization you have got, what kind of categories you have got. So over there, those stores would engage in a limited service. There are full service retail formats also, where you find that the kind of engagement that the retailer does is right from beginning till the end, they are with us. So, for example, if you're talking about a retail, a kind of an automobile, the engagement needs to be high. Or if you're buying for, let's say you're buying something like a high-end product, where the customer awareness may be limited. So that's where you, or the customer looks for the kind of facilities or more kind of intervention from the retailers, manpower or the people who are there. So over there, the personnel have to create those kind of avenues to have a full service set up to in order to cater to the customer requirements. Going forward, you can also, as I've told you, these are the product level, which are the super stores or your departmental stores, hypermarkets, specialty stores, convenience stores. If you go to convenience stores, they are the smallest ones, very small outlets. They could be proprietary owned, they could be owned by families, something which is very, very dominant in the Indian setup, which is the unorganized retail, so the kirana stores. But there are also stores, the various, why it is called convenience, because these are stores which are very strategically located to give a lot of help to the people in terms of their buying habits. For example, today's customers who are staying in, you must have seen, let's say in an apartment, near an apartment, there could be convenience stores which could be come up in the corner, or even nowadays there are planned apartments where they have convenience stores put into there. It's a kind of, we have created a departmental store where a kind of a supermarket sort of a thing, where each of these retailers are putting up convenience stores. They're small stores, but catering to the entire apartment which is there, or the entire area which is catering, which is subsisting on these. So you can have those kind of, which can, this is a blending of retail, where retailers are providing convenience of market or retail stores to the apartment dwellers. So what happens? The consumers from the catchment area is mostly from the apartment area. Outside can come in, but then point is primarily it is done with that location. Those kind of formats are coming. If you look at conventional convenience stores, they are mostly near the residential location, so that people who are traveling, when they have near the bus stop, they can find out, they can find it easy to come and buy. They could wait for the longer hours. They run on 20 on a 7-day format. Whereas as you move up the departmental stores or the supermarkets or the hypermarkets, you may not find that kind of a flexibility. But then yes, you will get a lot of assortment, lot of options to choose from in terms of products which are given. So the merchandise, as you move from a convenience store to a department stores to supermarkets to hypermarkets, you will find that the assortment significantly changes, giving more options to the customers to buy. So customers may buy something from the convenience stores, but they could also buy something else from the department stores. So they have their own importance. If you look at department stores, they are classified into various departments depending on the product categories, and you can have a complete set of, it's like an SBU within an organization. So each department has different kind of product categories. So for example, food and beverages, something could talk about groceries, something could talk about electronic gadgets, something talks about apparel, someone talks about jewelry. So there are different departments within the store. They are larger than the convenience stores. And as you move to the supermarkets, they are far bigger and mostly owned by the big time players like companies who are putting their money, like the future, like you have the Reliance Retail or the Aditya Birla Group. They are embedded in those kind of formats, and this requires very strategic location dynamics because they spring up in areas where they cater to the larger audience and they draw by the sheer size, they draw those people into their fold. And many stores could come up within those supermarkets. They also provide, this also becomes a kind of malls which could provide entertainment, it could provide road shows, it could provide opportunities for various kind of engagements with the customers. So when the customers visit these supermarkets, they not only engage for products but also look some kind of an excitement in terms of engaging with what kind of avenues are there. There could be a film, let's say PVR theater within that particular supermarket. That's possible. You look into Bangalore and NCR, they have been able to cut across various kind of products and services to cater to the marketplace. Hypermarkets, malls. Malls again are higher with their numbers are lower in Indian market, but then point is in tier one cities, their presence is extremely high, and they cater to the high end market, and also the larger number of. If you see the stores, they could go from convenience. What kind of stores that they have? They have got specialty stores. Specialty stores could be a part of the hypermarket. Specialty stores, by definition, deal as the name thing goes. You deal with some special kind of product. So, for example, you're a furniture company. You deal with only furnitures. Or if you're a book company, you've got a book, kind of opportunities. If you're talking about toys, you could specialize in that. So, depending on that particular aspect, you could have specialty stores. Now, these stores would be made available within the hypermarkets or the malls. So, according to the product line, these classifications are done. On the basis of price, the retail formats can also be further divided into discount stores, off-price retailers, and catalog showrooms. In case of, as the name suggests, when you're talking about discount stores, the discount stores are basically meant for those kind of customers who look into low price. So something like staples, which you could buy. Some of the cooperative stores, which we were talking about last time, can feature within these parameters. So if you look into the off-price retailers, we have got factory outlets. You must have seen for the discerning customers who are likely to pay, who look for markets which beyond the factory outlets, beyond the discount stores, they would like to get something exclusive. So you'll have a Nike store or a Arrow store, which has got a factory outlet. These outlets could be very different from their original outlet, the regular outlets, and they provide those kind of products which could have small aberrations, but they are left. There could be gone out of fashion. They're not selling, so those factory outlets can have these kind of products, but they are not bad in quality. Never think that they are bad in quality, hence they are put over there. No, but these are either leftovers or out of production, which are no longer being produced, but there is a market to it. People are ready to buy at a cheaper price. So you give price discounts to them in terms of that. There could be independent off-price outlets. So this has emerged because of the kind of for the price-sensitive customers. So these outlets, some of the retailers or companies have started opening up independent off-price outlets to counter the discount stores which are coming up in larger numbers. But it is very limited in India, but discount stores are a part of the space, but whether they would get into it is a question to be looked into. So not too much, but yes, there are off-price formats in certain markets to cater to the price-sensitive customers. Warehouse clubs are again like similarly on the price part, where you are giving due recognition to a membership. So, for example, if I'm having a website membership and they want to create a warehouse club, so I would get a special kind of a treatment out there in terms of pricing, in terms of product categories. So they can showcase goods and clothes, and mostly in apparel sector, you'll find that this is very much appreciated or it is looked into. Where a member who is a frequent buyer, who is patronizing that particular brand or that retail outlet, you are extending a kind of a service to them by opening up these warehouse clubs. And catalog showrooms are showrooms which are closer to warehouses. That's another part where you can get products at some kind of a price discount maybe, but mostly followed first are not meant for those for all products, but for those products which are very tangible, something like jewelry or household items and consumer electronics. You will find those kind of products ensuring catalog showroom. Again, not a very common feature in Indian formats, but then in certain markets you may find catalog showrooms coming up. The other way of in which you can classify retail formats are the something called the where you are the control mechanism. Retail formats from the point of view of control. That means what? The companies who are floating these retail outlets, they want to have a control over the retailing parameters. So if you say under that comes the retail chain, which we were talking about in the last class, the retail chain are mostly owned by big 10 companies. Thereby what happens is, okay, you open a store, but there are so many other things that goes into it. Creating, as I told you, they have to look into the kind of where they source out the material, where you should stock them, what kind of inventory materials, where is the warehousing, where is the transportation, how do you connect between these stores. You have to create a supply chain optimized solution to cater to the markets as well as leveraging on the kind of capabilities that you have. So when you talk about that, you will have to ensure that wherever you are trying to, whether you're getting into wholesaling, whether you're putting up a warehousing, whether you're putting up a distribution point, yes, you can invest in that, but then point is you need to have it under your control. Or would you like to give it to a third party? You get into a strategic alliance with some partner who would look into it. When it comes to that, corporate chains generally need to understand the value chain, right from inbound logistics to outbound logistics, as well as where would you curate it, where would you stock it, how is the market distributed, is it too large, is it too distributed, or is it too concentrated, then how do you leverage on the in terms of your investment. Do you put up dark stores? Currently dark stores are a very important part of in the quick service delivery market, right? These may not in terms of investment, yes, there is an investment, but not as high as the investment in the largest stores where you are talking in terms of interfacing with the customers, because you want to basically get into controlling these parameters, these outlets. Voluntary chain and retail cooperative. When you talk about voluntary chain, we are looking to where retailers would like to voluntarily like to get into, where wholesalers would like to get into retailing activities. There are, as I told you, not only companies but also intermediaries also want to get into the last mile of the retailing process because they know that's where the control is. So they deal with that kind of merchandise. They have that kind of volumes of inventory which they store. They create avenues where they can get into the retail markets. Retail cooperative, where a particular company or a wholesaler would like to have few would connect with few other independent stores and bring it into the fold, and they could share certain facilities like merchandise, distribution, transportation, and they would benefit from it. Franchising, which we had already talked about in the last class, where we are talking in terms of a franchisee and a franchisor model. Most of the avenues here are taken up by the franchisee because the franchisee basically creates the kind of infrastructure to manpower to kind of every kind of things, but the franchisor, because it is lending its brand name, would like to take the royalty. So yes, in that case also the control parameter of the franchisor on the franchisee is quite high, because otherwise it can lead to a lot of conflicts. If the franchisee starts stocking goods which the franchisor is not providing, is not allowed to do that, so certain contractual parameters come into play when you look into the franchisee organization. Same thing also holds good for merchandising conglomerate. In conglomerate, what happens? You leverage on the kind of products that you have got. Wholesalers would like to connect with, or companies would like to connect with those independent stores which have similarity in terms of merchandise, let's say apparels, and they are supplying to all these things and having a better control in terms of their engagement with the customer. So this is one of the ways in which the retail formats are worked out. In case of voluntary and retail cooperatives, which I talked about, the control mechanism is very strong, primarily because they enter into contracts. So there is a contractual agreement. So obviously that's where you find that the control is quite good. Uh, the next we move into the type of retail formats, which basically engages in terms of the how the store clusters are there. When you talk about store clustering, what do you mean by that? The number of stores that are available at a given point of time. Now, such kind of clustering is in India is quite dispersed actually. Yes, there are nowadays as the cities are expanding, they are growing at a phenomenal rate, and you find that there are suburban areas which are also growing as a part of the urban cities. So these pockets have created new avenues for the commercial central districts to come up. So thereby, what happens? You may have the central commercial districts. Let's say you announce that okay, in particular area you have commercial complexes. So that commercial complex gives you a kind of a infrastructure to develop. So those retailers would come over there, right? You may also have regional shopping centers. Now, this is very, again, very restricted to only certain markets. May not be there across all. So, it's for that electric bazaar. In Karol Bagh, you'll find that it consists of mostly the jewelries, right? You find that there's something called electric bazaar or a fashion market. And what happens? Sarojini market talks in terms in Delhi, talks in terms of everything in terms of for every kind of products, right? So it's a kind of regional shopping center. But the point here is what you need to do is they could be frequented by convenience stores. So bigger players may not like to open up their stores in these kind of things. Unlike this, in the western part, I was talking about where the the planning, the urban planning is so critical, so well done, so that you engage not only the residential areas, but you also provide a commercial district within the sphere. Thereby, what happens? You allow an infrastructure for the retail formats. So you find large players opening up their supermarkets or hypermarkets in those areas. Again, that is not it's slowly it is gaining momentum in the Indian market, mostly in the tier one and the tier two cities. It is yet to make its presence while it is entering the tier three cities, depending upon the market potential and the size of the markets, how many people would be interested in coming to those outlets. And because end of the day, as you move up the when you move up from the convenience store, specialty stores to department stores to supermarket, the kind of money that you need to pump in is quite high. So store-based retail formats have that particular aspect built into it, because otherwise it may not cater to the market well. Now, going forward, when we look into this, we must also understand little bit about store. I would like to come back to the physical store outlets. What makes this transition from a convenience store, specialty stores, hypermarkets, supermarkets? It's primarily because uh, different people behave in a different manner. Their expectations are different, and the degree of development in a given area is very different. Somewhere down the line, even the culture plays a very important role. What is the culture of consumerism? Today, do consumers feel confident of going to those outlets? Very interesting. There are certain product categories where people would not like to go and buy. I'll tell you a very classic example. Reliance Retail had gone into non-veg outlets, but they had to withdraw that because they found that not that meat cannot be sold in those supermarkets or departmental stores. It's primarily because the buying by behavior. If you see, the Indian consumer is not ready to buy. Of course, today we have brands like Lucius, right, which can reach those products on time. And because these kind of things are restricted to certain cities. But having said that, why this was rejected by the people? Primarily because yes, if it comes from a logic that I will only cater to the vegan public or the vegetarian public, obviously that is taken up. People have rejected this getting buying meat from the hypermarket primarily because, and this is restricted to mostly tier 2, tier 3 city, tier 3 especially, not to tier 2 and tier 1. there is a certain amount of adoption in these tier one and tier two, but in kind of tier three, it has been rejected outright. One of the critical insight is that people like buying fresh stuff. If you're talking about fish, you're talking about fresh catch. Now, to what degree can a retailer convince the customer that what you are trying to buy, especially with food products, which are susceptible to a wastage factor or can get putrefied, how are you taking care of it? Because when you find that in India, the kind of purchase of non-veg products deals with a lot of what is being seen by the people. Yes, it is very very gross. May feel very very gross about the kind of the way it is done, but that's how the market behaves. Now this is coming from the consumer, so consumer has to see that okay, you could say that okay, abattoirs have to be or the slaughterhouses have to be in certain places, some places away which should not be open to the public. That's correct. But today, when you talk about the stamp of quality, how many of them believe it, right? So when it comes to believability, they found that okay, these products are not selling. When these products do not sell, they get destroyed, which means it is a sunk cost for these retailers. So if you're into non-veg kind of, which we have seen those kind of products, but in Odisha we have got something on marine products, where prawns, fish, different kind of store-based retail outlets. They have opened up and they give a whole setup. But then within that setup also, they've been able to create specialized outlets to cater to these people, whereby they have been able to understand what does a customer go through while buying such products, right? So whether it is a jewelry, whether it is apparel, you will find those clusters coming up which have a uniqueness in those markets. And when you visit those markets, you get the stores which are available compete with each other. It's a cutthroat competition, but at the end of the day, they cater to the. So those kind of interventions are a typical nature of the Indian retail landscape. So organized retail needs to understand these parameters, just sensibly, just blindly getting into a retail format, making it available because there is a buyer, actually from the sustenance point of view, might throw up a lot of other challenges, which is very very difficult. Okay, now let's move to the other retail formats, which is catching up slowly. Now, I would say that yes, non-store based retail formats have been in the market for ages. Yes, they have been there, but with passage of time, with the way the market environment is evolving, the way in which retail formats are coming up in the non-store area is going through a sea change, right? The first format which we talk in terms of non-store is the which we you have come across is called the direct marketing. You know, in direct marketing, it's a very very important part of marketing procedure, where you feel that you must not have any kind of intermediaries in between the manufacturer and the consumer. That is the logic. But having said that, it's not so easy also. You would have to have, if that is so, the company has to ensure their logistics are taken care of, their inventories are taken care of in order to reach out to their people. But then direct marketing has been able to find some inroads for not for all product categories, but for certain categories, and some of them have even gone into mail orders. You must have seen Burlingtons and all that, Oriflame. They have been able to create multi-level marketing, which is a part of that, which is a basically a kind of a blend of multi-level marketing along with the traditional marketing, but is purely driven by the direct marketing effort. That means what the the buyer and the seller have to come together and create what is called the dyadic process, and mostly these of the product, because that requires a certain amount of convincing. That's why direct marketing requires a data. So for that, you need to have a database, create a database. Uh, you can reach out to them, you can send them mailers, or you can call them up. You can create online facilities where you can get into nowadays with a lot of AI and Autobots being brought into the place. You can generate a kind of on the non-store retailing, And if there is a need be, you make a visit. You haven't taken appointment, go there and can do it. Or in the you create within that space, you create avenues where you facilitate a transaction to take place or a sales to take place. So it could be both ways. It could be like you're sending some kind of catalog. You're trying to say what kind of things are there. If there's a need be, you can call back to us. You can integrate that into the online space and make it available. Direct selling, again, direct selling, I have already told about that. Okay, it could be like where you are face to face with the customers, which we call as a door to door. But then, having said that, door to door cannot be practiced because of the huge sales expenses involved in each transaction. Because when it boils down, it is not just boiling down to their direct selling interaction. It could, especially in a B2C format. In a B2B format, perhaps you can, to some extent, you can do direct selling. But in a B2C format, it's extremely difficult to keep your sales cost low and the cost of acquiring a customer could be extremely high. So yes, direct selling is practiced by some in some cases, but it is restricted to the kind of customers awareness is there. For example, in the insurance market, what can or investment options today? If I have to invest in mutual funds or whether I want to put into fixed deposits, for that you will find in banks you have relationship managers and the team of direct marketing agencies. Some of them have their own marketing people or they bank on the third party where the people go and talk to them directly and try to convince and tell them what it is about. Basically, when you do that, you are not looking into selling, but actually, what you are attending is the areas of concern that they may have and how effectively you are able to persuade them. So, direct selling has again changed over the years. If I talk about multi-level marketing, like what Amway, with the example that you see here, yes, they somewhere down the line, the direct selling is a critical part of that space. Yes, you may also opportunity gives the opportunity on direct selling on the e-retailing is also there, but that is that particular chunk of the market is very less. The amount of revenue that they earn from there would be less. The market shares in those areas would be less. Telemarketing is another very concept which you have come across or have read about. That if you get a call from somebody, then they try to convince you to buy. Again, Indian customers have shown very degree of reliance in such kind of things because non-store retailing is some of the players, I'm not saying all the players, but some of the players, they have a trust deficit. So players who are in that space need to understand this, that somewhere it warrants a kind of a manual intervention. Everything cannot be used only in telemarketing. Yes, the manual intervention is there. We are talking in terms of the how the calls. If you see the call center operations today, those people also give you a set of answers to a particular kind of way. They are not prepared to handle complicated issues, which can happen in cases. That's why the trust factor diminishes and the effectivity also is getting affected. Now, for to do that, the people who are in telemarketing, they have to train the people in the right manner so that they could take a worst case scenarios, cases may be developed. They need to build that capability among the people who are dealing with this customer. It's a very tough call because understand uh, people when consumers are the most unpredictable resource unpredictable parameters because they do not know that a particular approach may fit their requirements or may not. So the people who are handling such cases should understand, yes, there are certain things which can be which can be formatted, which can be specified, but there are many things which cannot be specified also. So do they have the acumen to understand this? Now this comes with a lot of practice, experience, and handling real-time scenarios, which could be found, may not be generalized for all. There are people who sell, who basically give troubleshooting and all those kind of things in terms of telemarketing. That's fine, but even that there is a limited acceptability of that. I would say I have not seen that major inroads to telemarketing. Some of them do have, they've been able to make inroads, but initially they have been able to make some kind of a kind of a positive impression. Going forward in terms of sustained methods, well, that is the big question mark. So again, that is an area which needs also to be evolved, need to engage at a different level altogether, and can only be perhaps blended maybe with the store-based formats. Maybe that may be helping. I do not know. But yes, as I told you, we are in a market which is changing every second, every hour. And with the customer's expectation, the behavior, where the predictability of the behavior is even your predictive analytics, which is used to predict the behavioral aspects, even if you work out the best possible approach, may not ultimately yield results. So, what does that tell you? You need to have very good capable or the competency that you need to have in terms of people who can deliver those kind of services to the customers has to be top notch, and it is not everybody's cup of tea, right? So people have to come up with very specialized modules, especially in HR when we look into training and development, to develop those kind of resources within the manpower who can cater. And mostly it has to be organic. It cannot be an inorganic acquiring something or going into third party, giving it to them. They'll do it well. It may meet the, to some extent it may help, but it does not always work out. The other cluster is definitely the e-tailing, what is called the electronic retailing, something which I've seen the Amazons, the Flipkarts, the Mintras of the world. Earlier, you had seen a huge deluge of dot-com companies which came into play, and then slowly, it is getting restructured. As I told you, getting into the space is very, very easy in non-store retailing because of the maybe the entry barriers are low. So an entrepreneur would say, "Oh, let me just get into this. I have only fixed some kind of. I have the technical knowledge. I can curate this, make it happen." Hold on, it does not happen. If you take a sneak peek into what Amazon and Flipkarts have done and the kind of planning that they do in terms of making what Amazon is today is humongous. Catering to diverse needs across the globe, the same kind of approach may not fit in everywhere. Yes, you create a portal, you create a platform where you can engage with a larger audience. But then again, which geographical location requires what kind of requirements? Data analytics will come to the forefront in terms of understanding consumer insights, understanding what behavior the consumers are doing, what kind of products they are buying, what kind of, and if you talk about cultural differences, you must understand Hofstede study talks in terms of the cultural differences that exist in markets. So if you're talking about an Indian consumer, maybe we have a more collectivist kind of scenario where people love to take decisions depending on certain influencing factors, which we call as opinion leaders or influencers who could play. In American market, they're very individualistic. So the same Amazon, when they are curating their marketing communication through their digital space, or they're trying to come up with any kind of digital integration in terms of social media presence, they have to come up with campaigns which actually talk in terms of making these relevant cultural influences, which might make things work in their favor or may not work in their favor. So today, if you see, Amazon has to work out according to the market requirement. This Amazon India. India is a different ballgame altogether. They know that they cannot establish. And today, India being a vast country where you have to reach out to the every nook, and if you really want to garner market shares, you need to have a very well toned supply chain management, which means what, you have to have very good warehouse facilities, where distribution points. You should have people who should take care of these logistic issues to reach out to the customers. And when you are promising something on the, so it's a, though it is a non-store based retail format, the back-end operations have to be supporting the what is the promise that you are making on an online store format. So it is not just a case of, okay, Amazon, these are the clusters, these are the kind of product categories. Yes, that is there. That is basically ensuring that the customer has the ease of navigating the a platform, taking a very well-informed decision, or being aware of, or being able to compare with your competitors, because at the end of the day, it's e-retail, so you have multiple brands available, so you can do a mapping over there. The customer does that, but when it comes to buying, would the customer believe in what they are seeing on the online formats? Now, across product categories, the degree of conviction that is there has shown different kind of adoption rates from the customer side. So many of them would like to have create a kind of a store-based outlets in certain select places, not every place, so that they can convince these people. And Amazon has been able, if you look into the supply chain, which I was telling you some time before, that until unless you create opportunities to reach out to your market where your market exists, just promising just becoming on the online space is fine. But when until unless you reach out, it may backfire on you. It may create a negative. The same thing also holds good for Flipkart. The success of Flipkart's and Amazon or Mintra's would primarily depend on they get into strategic alliances with logistic partners. Amazon has its own, maybe its own e-cart system, where they could have various players who could get into strategic alliances for delivering into certain markets. That talks about market penetration, because until unless you're just promising people that okay, within the expected days to ETA, fine. But if it is not happening, it's creating a negative impression about your capabilities and about your. So it is somewhere down the line, promises made by such players in the e-retailing space. It is also true for generalized retail. Also, whatever you are promising, this goes as a standard kind of a thing, but more so for an e-commerce player, because telling is one thing, making it happen is another thing. So if you have to succeed in a market which is where there is cutthroat competition, you will find a lot of people opening up these kind of wannabe stores, online stores. But when it comes to after some few years, you find these stores have either wound up or they have restructured or been acquired by the big players in order to increase their capacities. So e-retailing needs to be taken with a bit of pinch of salt, right? Um, Another thing is automatic vending machines, which we talk in terms of. Vending machines have been used not very extensively in India. Mostly it's a Western phenomenon, but then yes, in India it is slowly catching up in those pockets where like food rings in case of airports, and you want to buy chips, right? So food and beverages, it has been extensively used, is not being used very extensively uh, by all the players in the marketplace. So vending machines, though they come with a very novel idea of making products available at any point of time, but maintenance of those vending machines is also important criteria. In India, if you talk about vending machine in terms of teleservices, I will give you the telephone booths which came out, right? Before you had the mobile phones, we used to have those telephone booths which could come up in some corners to facilitate the communication to the people. You have to use a particular kind of a coin to make. Now this is something which has been very strongly seen in the Western world. It was replicated in India, but unfortunately did not catch on. It was only a kind of a metro kind of a thing. Mumbai and all that, you will find that yes, those kind of outlets in terms of calling was possible. But with respect to other products, maybe to some extent, but yes, in controlled environment, in public space, vending machines have a very sad story to tell. There have been a lot of loot, lot of even in case of banks, where you're talking about ATM machines being provided, half the time I think the bank has to be very worried about the kind of security that you need to provide at those outlets, because these ATM counters have to be replenished from time to time, but at the same time, they also have to be given security, which means today's security is of a major concern in terms of a place like a bank ATM counter or a phone, because certain investments go into it, and In some markets, it has thrived. I would not say it has not thrived in some markets, but in certain markets, it has not. So, if you say in Indian market is slowly catching up, maybe banking industry, the ATM from the vending machines has been very successful story. But with the advent of digital money, digital transactions, UPI kind of formats which are emerging, vending machines are also finding its limited usage as far as money transactions are concerned. But yes, you can always make it happen in case of food and beverages, like when you want to purchase some water bottles or beverages, or you want to have a tea or a coffee from an automatic vending machine. Those kind of possibilities are there, but then they have to be made available in certain locations, like in railway stations, in commercial business districts, specific, where the security part can be taken care of, and these people need to interact with a larger audience. So that these are some of the evolution which is happening in the case of non-store based retail. But then you will find that companies do have these kind of parameters that both in stores and not store. Nowadays in India, as I told you, people are awakening to the fact that you need to have a kind of a omni-channel option where you are existing in both offline and online stores. You need to blend both of them so that you can, it becomes important for you to cater to the market. If you look in store-based formats, which we have already talked about, as I've already mentioned, some of the characteristics they require in physical infrastructure, locational dynamics are critical for their successes. But then store formats, essentially from non-store formats, differ in the sense like they require huge capital investment and the operating cost could be very high. So for anybody to just run into that today, no. The retail mix decisions, the marketing decision related to the retailing mix, the what kind of store format, what is the market, how big is the store, where all will you come up, all these decisions that come up would require a real vetting and validating in terms of doing that homework very well, right? Uh, of course, store formats give you a lot of advantage in terms of giving an opportunity for the customer to directly interact. And as I told you, that is the biggest challenge for most of the retailers, and most of them want to get into retailing because of that, because they get the ultimate chance to interact with the customers. But with non-store retailing coming, that part also is taken, because many people do not want to have any kind of discussions with the shopkeeper. Maybe if they don't want, they move on, but they will not let you get into a kind of an engagement in terms of arguing or anything. But definitely, when you have a kind of customer interface, you have people to interact with. It not only gives you immediate feedback, it also gives you a kind of opportunity to understand what the consumer is behaving and what are they looking forward to in terms of the product categories, in terms of what can be in comparison to the competition. So it gives a lot of sneak peek into their buying habits. Apart from that, you also have to have, I would say, inventory, ambience, those kind of investments have to be there. Visual merchandising in store-based formats is something which you need to maintain. But inventory is also a common factor in the case of non-store based formats, because as I was just telling you that today you talk in terms of in the Instamart or the Blinkit, where you are in the QSD category, they have to have dark stores basically to supplement what they are trying to offer to the consumers at large. Display format, display and store ambience are critical today because, as I told you, in the hypermarkets, supermarkets, other specialty stores, they have to create an ambience. You go to the Nike store, it creates an ambience to draw attention. You go to McDonald's outlet, it creates an ambience of informality, right? So you have to understand these things very important in terms of in case of malls, in case of supermarkets. The attraction of a outlet primarily depends upon the visual display and the ambience that you are creating. Ambience is not only created by the fixtures that you have, but also by the people who are at the helm of affairs. We also look into the kind of advantages and store advantages. I think that I've already talked about. In Indian context, we know that there are mom and pop stores, modern format supermarkets. They have already talked about these parameters. Cultural diversity I've already talked about. So to sum up, if you want to say the retail space requires both store-based formats as well as non-store-based formats. Now, to be successful in both of them, you have to integrate both to be successful in this market. And the right format has to be the right kind of product types and the customer base, and in an environment which is encouraging them, which may not be similar across the physical length and breadth of the country. So it is a question of adaptability. End of the day, how the retail landscape is going evolving, and in terms of retailing decisions, retailers have to adapt or create a retail mix that fits into the evolving retail landscape. With this, we conclude today's session. Thank you for your patience.